So I have been making a lot of top 10 type of videos lately, and sometimes it can be difficult to not mention the same books and series over and over again because they're my favorites, they're in my top 10. So I wanted to take some time to bring some attention to some new fantasy books that were released this year. Today I'm going to be reviewing 5 incredible new fantasy books that you need to add to your ever-expanding reading list. You thought you could beat your TBR? Think again, okay? It is my job to keep on adding to your reading list. You can't escape this fate. The TBR must expand. It can't be beaten. But hold on, before getting into it, you might notice I have a new chair. This video is sponsored by FlexiSpot. As someone who spends countless hours at my desk creating content, I know the struggle of sitting for long periods of time. The discomfort, the aches, especially in my lower back, it can really add up after a while. And that's why having an ergonomic chair is an absolute game changer. This is the FlexiSpot C7 chair. Not only was it very easy to assemble, but it's also designed to address those exact pain spots that I've been dealing with. No more sore back for me. The lumbar support automatically adjusts as I move, providing continuous support no matter how I shift or change positions. The C7 series features patented adjustable lumbar support that is precisely tailored to your spine's natural motion, with synchronized adjustments in the backrest, seat, and headrest. So you stay snugly supported, reducing spinal and sciatic pressure in your back, your waist, and your hips. This chair is all about customization, so whether you're sitting normally, cross-legged, or reclining, you can adjust the seat, the backrest, and even tilt the seat forward if you need to lean in with your work, which I'm often doing when I'm editing videos. And don't worry about durability, this chair is meant to last. It supports up to 300 pounds, and it has a 20-inch seat, so you can sit cross-legged or whatever position works for you. Also, they got a 10-year warranty and 30-day free returns. It's sturdy, it's stable, and honestly, I can't believe how comfortable it is for long hours of work. And it has these 3D adjustable armrests, which really offers a lot of freedom of movement. Also, the mesh design keeps things cool, which is so important when you're sitting for hours at a time. It's breathable and comfortable even during those long video editing marathons. And I've even been using this chair as my reading chair as well because of the lumbar support and the comfort. If you're looking for an ergonomic chair that truly adapts to you, then the FlexiSpot C7 is the perfect choice. So click the link in the description and use my exclusive code C730. Purchase the C7 today and enjoy a $30 discount. This is the best time to buy a C7. Huge thank you to FlexiSpot for sponsoring the video. Okay, moving on to expanding your TBR even further. First up, we have the Silverblood Promise. This is a thrilling, incredible debut book by James Logan, and this is book 1 in the Last Legacy series. Now, if you are a fan of heist stories, gritty cityscapes, and a protagonist that is clever and quick-witted, this is the story for you. This book had me completely hooked. It introduces us to this world that kind of has an early modern Italian vibe to it, very reminiscent of like The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. And I mean that in the best of ways, obviously. I'm a big fan of The Gentleman Bastards, and I feel like any Scott Lynch fan needs to read this book. The story follows Lucan Gardova, who goes from being an heir to a noble house to a disgraced failure, and turns to a life of gambling and drowning his sorrows with wine. But then he discovers his father has been murdered. Now, he didn't really have the best relationship with his dad, but his dad leaves behind a note written in blood with 3 words on it. And then this mystery sets him on a journey from shady taverns to the mother of cities, a city called Safrona. And Safrona is a melting pot of cultures and crime syndicates, and here we discover deadly politics and monsters and merchant princes, and this is a very breathtaking and like memorable setting. And it's here that he tries seeking for answers, but instead finds himself solving a puzzle that could possibly prevent a war. And he teams up with Flea, this street-smart orphan, as well as a bunch of other characters, Warrior, the Scrivener, who's this master forger. And as Lucan digs deeper into the mystery, he not only unearths hidden truths, but also faces the harsh reality of what he must sacrifice to uncover them. This book was an instant favorite of mine. I was surprised it was a debut, and despite being over like 500 pages, it reads really fast. It felt shorter than it actually is, and obviously that's a good thing. And it really scratches that itch of a certain type of fantasy that I really enjoy. I love heist stories that have a lot of mystery to them, and rogue characters where there's a lot of clever, witty dialogue and clever plotting, and a great duo that bounce off of each other. I love that type of story. That's why I love The Lies of Locke Lamora, I love the Rhaenyra Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan, and now The Silverblood Promise is a new favorite of mine. I really enjoy the relationships between the characters here. Lucan and Flea in particular, they have this great dynamic to them. They kind of bounce off of each other. I love the banter and the camaraderie, and Flea, despite being a child, is very smart, and she's got a lot of street skills because she grew up on the street, and she ends up helping Lucan a lot in cases, because sometimes, you know, he's not the smartest at times, but he also is smart. Lucan is very clever. He's a card sharp, so he can read people very well. But he can also be an idiot at times too, and things can go against him very badly. He's such a great rogue type of character, but then also his noble blood can kind of slip through sometimes. He can be very quick with his tongue and get into trouble. His inner thoughts are laced with sarcasm and wit, and at least to me, this made him a very enjoyable and likable character to read. Now, there isn't really a lot of magic in this world, but when we do get magic and when we do get these strange creatures, it just makes the impact even that more surprising. And there is some things here that really surprised me with the world building. There's a lot going on. And again, Sophrona is an incredible setting. It's very vibrantly brought to life by Logan. If you enjoy a fast-paced story that has a lot of mystery to it, and it has some great camaraderie and banter between the characters, then you need to read The Silverblood Promise. And for Scott Lynch fans, this is a must-read. And next up, we have The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman, author of the Magician's Trilogy. Now, this was sent to my P.O. box, so I'm very fortunate for that. Thank you. This released July 16th, 2024, I believe, so it's a pretty new book. If you love Arthurian legend but want like a fresh spin on it, this might just scratch that itch. Now, I am not terribly familiar with all the Arthurian legends, but I guess I have read like a fair amount. I'm just not like a die-hard fan of it, but I do enjoy it. Anyways, thankfully you don't need to be like terribly familiar with all the Arthurian legends before getting into this book. You don't need to be an expert on all the old tales to enjoy this brand new take. The novel reimagines Britain after the death of King Arthur. Yes, he has been dead for 2 weeks, and the kingdom is already crumbling into chaos. And for young Colum, our protagonist, it is especially bittersweet because he arrives in Camelot with these high hopes of becoming a knight of the Round Table, only to find a broken kingdom and a shattered dream, with the once glorious Round Table now being reduced to the remnants, the rejects, the dregs. Now, most of these knights that were left over, I'm not terribly familiar with. I do recognize a few of the names. Maybe you'll recognize more of them than I did, but that's kind of the point. This is focused on the misfits and the oddballs of the Round Table that you don't really hear too much about, and that includes even Arthur's fool, who was knighted as a joke. And again, this version of Camelot is very bleak, actually. There's no heir to the throne. Arthur Robert died battling against his son, Guinevere has become a nun, and Merlin has just like vanished. Like I said, Britain is on the edge of collapse, yet even in this very bleak time, there's still quests and adventures and new stories to tell, and young Colum is set on becoming a knight. Now, in my opinion, what made this book so engaging to me is just how it blends modern storytelling with that classic feeling of a romance and an epic quest. Now, the narrative often diverts from the quest of finding Britain's next heir to tell the story of the surviving knights and their personal journeys. And while I did enjoy learning about these knights, at times it does get a little bit meandering and the pace kind of slows down, but then the book always managed to pull me back in. That is probably like the one issue I can think of that I had with it, is that it was kind of meandering at times, but again, it always pulls you back in, and I really enjoyed Colum's like earnestness to his character, his quest for purpose, and his camaraderie with all the other knights. And there's actually a lot of humor in this book that comes unexpectedly at times. Like, it kind of reminds me a bit of Joe Abercrombie's First Law books, how, you know, it's very bleak. The whole plot and setting and everything is pretty bleak, but then there's this humor that is just catches you off guard at times. And I really love that juxtaposition in the story. It works really, really well in this book. We get some great dialogue that kind of takes the edge off of some of the darker elements of the story. Now, in this book, Britain coexists with the other world that's ruled over by Morgan Le Fay. And we get these fey creatures that pop up once in a while, along with other monsters and knights. And we get a recounting of the quest for the Holy Grail, as well as retrieving the spear that pierced Jesus' side. There's a lot going on in this book, and it's such a great adventure. Overall, this book was brilliant. I feel like it should be up there with The Once and Future King as a new staple for Arthurian legends and retellings. And I feel like even if you don't typically read like medieval fantasy, I think you should still give this book a chance. Now for something a little lighter, but equally brilliant, and that is I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons by Peter S. Beagle. Now, Beagle has long been a beloved figure in fantasy. I mean, The Last Unicorn is a staple of the genre, and he's known for his charming and whimsical take on fantasy, and he doesn't disappoint with this new book. And this book is a long time coming, but it doesn't disappoint. The man returns with a new book that feels fresh, and it's whimsical, but also surprisingly dark at times. And first of all, I gotta give a shout out to this cover. I love the design here. This is like everything you want in fantasy. It's got this epic castle in the background, all these dragons and vivid colors. I love this cover. It's kind of reminding me of the Edge Chronicles, if you've ever read those books. Is it the same artist? I should actually check. Cover and end paper artwork by Justin and Annie Gerard. Oh yeah, by the way, we also get this vibrant end paper with all these dragons. And in typical Beagle fashion, the characters in I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons are all grappling with dissatisfaction in their lives. And the protagonist, one second, Gaius Aurelius Constantine Heliogabulus Thrax, who would much rather people call him Robert, is a dragon exterminator by trade, a job that he inherited from his father. And while his job mostly consists of ridding the nobles' homes from these small gecko-like dragons, Robert feels a deep affinity for these creatures that he's supposed to be exterminating, and he secretly loves them. He even keeps some of them as pets. And I can relate. I mean, who doesn't want to keep a little gecko dragon as a pet? Now his life takes a big turn when the king hires him to clear the palace where Princess Cerise lives in preparation for a visit from this handsome Prince Reginald, who also, like Robert, has a lot of parental issues. And then what starts as this quirky, lighthearted adventure that's kind of reminiscent of The Princess Bride also gets a bit of a darker spin to it as well. The trio sets out on this quest to slay a dragon and prove Reginald's heroism, which leads them to this village that's been completely annihilated by a force far beyond any dragon that Robert has encountered. And Beagle manages to skillfully shift the tones here as we get this looming threat of the legendary king dragons who haven't been seen for generations. Obviously, the book has a lot of humor and heart to it, but I really appreciate how Beagle brings depth to these pretty archetypal characters. Archetypal? Is that how you say it? Archetypal? I think that's how you say it. Anyway, he brings a lot of depth to these characters. Robert, Cerise, and Reginald, they're all struggling with expectations and identity, and it really elevates it from just like a mere parody. It adds a lot of depth to the story. I will say there is a villain here, this wizard, and his motivations are a little bit murky. I wish there was maybe a bit more detail on that, but overall, Beagle has a knack for taking these familiar tropes and turning them into living, breathing figures, and it's very effective. Overall, this is a pretty lighthearted story, but then it also contains some of Beagle's deeper themes of dissatisfaction, discovery, and the blurred lines between good and evil. If you are a fan of Beagle's earlier work, or you're just looking for a story that has a lot of whimsy and also depth to it, then you need to read I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons. And then we have The Daughter's War by Christopher Buehlman. This is the prequel to The Black Tongue Thief. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything for book one. I'm not going to spoil this story either. I'll tell you a little bit of background though, so that you can understand what this is about. The world of The Daughter's War, it takes place in the same world as The Black Tongue Thief. Obviously, this war-torn landscape that's been ravaged by the goblin invasions. And the story takes place during the war of the same name, a conflict that once saw knights and farmers called to arms, and now sees the daughters of the realm marching to battle. And Buehlman masterfully captures the horrors of war, both its physical and emotional tolls, and it has a sharp focus on Galva. Now, Galva from the first book was a veteran soldier, and here she is an untested soldier, and she's experiencing the brutal realities of battle for the first time. Now, I gotta say, the goblins in Buehlman's world are not the typical goblins you see in fantasy. These goblins are terrifying and intelligent, and they have a craving for human flesh. The creepy matter-of-factness way in which they farm and devour human flesh, it really adds like a layer of horror to these novels. And obviously Christopher Buehlman has also written horror novels as well, so some of that kind of translates over into this. Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman is such a great book. Highly recommend that. I need to make a full book review video on that, probably this October. Anyway, seeing the true terror of these goblins, it's really a grim reminder that this isn't just a fight for honor or whatever. It is a struggle for survival. And it's a desperate struggle. It's a threat that looms over every page, and it really adds a lot of tension and like nerve-wracking qualities to the battle scenes. Now, Galva's journey is not just about fighting goblins, okay? The heart of the narrative really is the relationships, and particularly with her brothers. Each of the siblings is engaged in the war in a different way. The eldest is this drunken mess of a soldier, to the youngest, who is this assistant to the wizard that created these giant birds that are trained to hunt the goblins. And I would say it's the character development that stands out the most. I mean, Galva goes from this green soldier to the hardened warrior that we saw in The Black Tongue Thief. Oh yeah, I just got distracted looking at the covers, but I really love how these covers go together so well, and the spines too. I don't know, I like it. I like the design. I'm really hoping we're gonna get more books in this universe. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure if he's writing a third one. I hope so. Anyways, her character evolution is just compelling, it's heartbreaking, and it's through her that we see the true cost of the war. If you enjoy grimdark fantasy or emotionally character-driven stories, I can't recommend these books enough. And then we have The Book That Broke the World by Mark Lawrence. This didn't just break the world, this shattered my soul into pieces and broke my brain, to the point I'm thinking of sending Lawrence my medical bills. Okay, Okay, I'm joking. I'm Canadian. I don't have medical bills. But that is how much this book impacted me and surprised me. The first book, this is book 2 in the library trilogy. The first book, The Book That Wouldn't Burn, was one of my favorite books I read in the year. And this is a book that also surprised me so much. I was not expecting to like this book as much as I did, because it did take me a while for this book to truly get invested in the book. It took me a while. I started it once, I put it down, I came back to it, and then eventually I just got hooked and it really clicked for me, and it's one of my favorite books now. I still intend on making a full video review on this book later this year, and you're probably going to see it return as well in my top 10 books that I read in 2024 that I'm going to put out at the end of the year. But yeah, this book really took me by surprise, and I'm not going to spoil anything for book 1 in this video, because the sequel does take place directly after the crazy events that happen at the end of book 1. So I'm not going to go over anything there. Now, the world that Mark Lawrence creates here revolves around the Athenaeum, this legendary library that houses the collective knowledge of humanity across time. And it's all rooted in this ancient family feud that goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. And the library symbolizes an ongoing war between those who believe knowledge should be preserved and those who think humanity should start over after each great calamity. And this ideological struggle forms the backdrop of the series. But in this sequel, Lawrence raises the stakes, revealing just how dangerous the battle for control over information can be. Now, the series wraps around the lives of 2 characters, Lavira, who, like the weed she was named after, cannot be put down, and Evar, who grew up trapped inside the library. And in the book that broke the world, we're now introduced to this new character named Selcha, who's a slave that discovers hidden knowledge that then kickstarts these history-altering events. And Lawrence does such a great job introducing these characters and also bringing these emotional connections to them that just raises the stakes of all the drama. This is such a seamless blend of fantasy and sci-fi, and where the last book, it has all these technological remnants of a lost age, the sequel takes things even further, and I really enjoyed the intricate plotting here, and even though the story just grows more and more complex, it never loses that sense of wonder that just keeps me reading. Like, there's so many cool ideas going on in this book. And I would say at its heart, The Book That Broke the World, it explores these philosophical questions of memory and knowledge, and whether we're truly in control of our destinies or not. It's about remembering and about the struggle for control over the stories we tell. It's very thought-provoking and heart-wrenching, and truly, it deserves a spot among the best fantasy of our time, and I'm not saying that lightly. Please, you need to give the library trilogy a chance. I feel like there's too many people that haven't read these books yet, and they're truly incredible. It's now one of my favorite series. And those are 5 incredible new fantasy books you need to add to your ever-growing TBR pile. Let me know in the comments which of these books you're most excited to dive into. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and if you really want to support the channel, the best way to do that is by joining my Patreon. Huge thank you to all my patrons. You guys are amazing, and I'll see you soon.